Welcome to the Ovation Healthcare Learning Institute podcast, your source for informative and inspiring conversations around the world of healthcare. Hear from the individuals and organizations making a positive impact on the industry and bettering the health and economic wellness of their communities. In each episode, we bring together thought leaders, healthcare professionals, and industry experts to discuss the latest trends, technologies, and best practices. Whether you're a provider, a patient, or simply interested in the ever evolving world of healthcare, this podcast offers valuable insights across the entire care continuum. Subscribe today and be a part of the Ovation Healthcare journey.
All right. With that, I'm so excited to talk about clinical leadership, improving the experience of care. So a couple things. First off, don't let the first slide throw you off. You see this and you think, okay, clinical is in charge of improving the experience of care. That's not the case. It's everybody. Everybody absolutely plays a really important role in experience of care improvement and development across these organizations. It just is the way it is. So already, my apologies for if there's any confusion, but you're in the right place because this is for everyone. The other piece I wanted to mention is when I was here last year, I spent a lot of time talking about the connection between quality and safety and experience of care. Patient experience specifically. That is still super important. I'm not going to touch on it much today because this is just kind of the next step, the next evolution. But if you want to talk more about that, please find me because boy, am I passionate about that. And Chris isn't wrong. You'll have to hear me talk and talk and talk, but it's because I get really excited about it. And I know that we're doing the right things for our patients and our employees and everyone else when we talk about that conversation. Anyways, so here we go. Thank you so much for having me back. So happy to be here. All right, so just a really simple agenda. I start talking now about experience of care. Why is that different? What is that not? We'll talk quickly about that. Talk a little bit about healthcare challenges. Talk about prioritizing improvement efforts. And then as everyone else did, I'm gonna give you a couple key takeaways, and then I'd love to hear your questions. All right, so first thing, and this is kind of helps me take a breath. Let's all just talk for a second and center ourselves. What is healthcare? This is a really simple definition. Healthcare is human beings caring for human beings. It's about people caring for people. And it's not just clinicians, as I mentioned. It is clinicians, it is providers, but it is leadership, it is board members, it is the community. It is everybody working together to provide care for each other. And we have to do that together. So this is where everybody plays a really important role in this and why we're all here today. By the way, you'll mention I stole this, borrowed it, from the Beryl Institute. This is their definition. If we'd not heard of the Beryl Institute, it's actually one of the leading organizations in the experience of care sort of field. It's where my certification comes from. It's some other experts, and they certainly lead a lot of research in this space. So as we hear reference it and things along the way, that's who I use as kind of my North Star on that. And if we've met, or if I've come to your site and we've talked about this already, and you know that I'm a little passionate about this, likely that I've shared this slide with you already, but just so that everyone's seen this. If we're gonna define experience of care, it really starts with patient experience. Now, patient experience historically has had a little bit of a bad reputation. It started out, people focused almost exclusively on customer service. And while there's some elements of that in experience of care, it isn't just about putting a mint on the pillow. It isn't just about having a resort-like experience in our hospitals. Because let's be honest, people don't come to the hospital to be at a resort, right? Patient experience, it's that sum of interactions. It's shaped by the organization's culture. It influences patient perception across the continuum of care. That's everybody. And how we all work together makes all the difference. Around that, sort of, if you will, is the workforce experience. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. So the workforce experience plays a huge part in that. I'm here to say you can't have one without the other. If you don't have a workforce that is thriving, that is engaged, that is really, feel as though they're part of this, you're just not going to be able to deliver the experience of care you're looking for. We also have that community experience. This is all part of that human experience overall that the Beryl Institute defines here. Now, Chris mentioned earlier about PFACs, those patient and family advisory councils. I understand there might have been a question earlier today about that. That is a great way to get community involvement, to really get the big picture of what everyone's thinking, what they're feeling, what that experience of care looks like overall for them. Because when we talk about healthcare consumerism, they are absolutely at the forefront to that. So absolutely important there too. So we'll kind of think in that big picture, if you will. So we also always talk about what drives a positive experience. If we're going to improve, we need to know where we start, but it's also good to have a roadmap that we know what's most effective or most efficient to help us get from point A to point B. So if we're going to start with patient experience, kind of the center, if you will, of that overall model, it's really not a big surprise. What's most important to patients, if you look at what's measured, and this is through surveys, but other data sourcing as well, they want to see teamwork and engagement. So they want to see us working together really well. They want to see us incredibly engaged in care, that we're there and we're dedicated. They want to see high quality clinical care. And they want to have a respectful and courteous communication. This makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, what patients really want, they want safe, high quality, and very patient-centered care. They want to know that they can trust us. They want to build a relationship with us. The community wants to build a relationship with us. It's not just a transactional experience anymore. They're coming to us and really entrusting us in their care. And when I say patient-centered care, someone said this once and I love it. It's as if there should be nothing about the patient without the patient. How do we invite them to the table? How do we have them co-design and the architecture of what we're delivering for them? That's so important that they be part of it, particularly as we look at the generations that come, what that looks like for consumerism. We really see that continuing to evolve. So positive patient experience, generally people don't debate me too much on that. It's pretty well known. That's actually where CAP surveys, so if you're familiar with HCAPs, I saw some hands up go before, those are really designed around experience of care. So it's not asking so much how satisfied you were, it's saying how reliable were services delivered. Does this experience meet those expectations from a larger picture, if you will? Okay. We often think, though, about, from your perspective, what's keeping you up at night around healthcare? I know the ACHE does a survey every year or two to say to our CEOs, what's keeping you up at night? The last few years, they stopped saying finance as number one. So if you participate in that survey, thank you. But interestingly, it moved away from finance as number one. It's shifted to healthcare workforce challenges, number one. And it has been for several years now. Because we know it's back to we're people taking care of people. So the people at that sharp edge of care, we're worried about. And that's keeping you all up at night, I'm sure. And a few of you already mentioned that to me. So things like staffing shortages, burnout, the aging workforce, and workplace violence up top, those are pretty common. I know we hear a lot in the literature about how to address those things, how to really look to that, but sometimes we hear a little less about the bottom. Administrative burdens, high cost of healthcare. We feel like that's on us, maybe in the boardroom, in the executive room. People at the bedside feel that too. It makes a huge difference. Lack of diversity, not only in our patient population, but how do we match what we're delivering? Are we looking and feeling and providing equity in that space as well? And then what kind of educational pipeline do we have? So if we were to kind of peel the onion back a little on that nightmare situation, these are really what's contributing to that overall. So we talked about patient experience, what drives that. So let's talk a little bit about employee experience and what's driving that as well. So I took a little bit of a different turn into a new study I found. I actually really like this one. It was published in the Patient Experience Journal. It's really talking about understanding modern drivers of employee experience in healthcare, because that's evolved over the years as well, right? And I'm actually gonna make sure I say this correct, because this was a little bit new for me too. But I always talk about it matching perfectly what patients want. And perhaps we talked about this once before. When I became a nurse, when I went to nursing school, it wasn't to get a good HCAP score, right? Not only because I'm old enough that HCAPs didn't exist then, but because it wasn't really what that focus was. When somebody handed me a 5 and asked me to put on a button, I said, that's not why I became a nurse, right? But they're able to now do this through some research, really find ways to measure that and define what that is looking overall. So the themes that drive patient employee experience absolutely do match that. We still want to deliver high quality care. We still want to work as a team. We still want to make sure that we are doing it in a safe, effective way and very patient-centered an approach. That fills our cup, absolutely. But if we were to look at priority themes, looking about self-esteem, thinking about belonging, and the individual impact that we have as the workforce makes all the difference. So finding ways to address that through growth and development opportunities, through strategic alignment, all of those things impact experience of care, not only for patients, but for your workforce as well. That's a big difference. I like that article, or that research, I should say, and it really does start to bring out, as we think about evaluating what that looks like. If you don't ask your employees what's driving their experience, what that looks like for them, think about that, because it does really feed into how they are engaged and how they're delivering experience of care, as I said, on that sharp edge. Okay, so we've used the word burnout a couple times. It's become almost a bit of a buzzword, but for a really important reason, because it's a huge issue in healthcare. I don't know that anyone would argue with me on that, right? We're worried about that a lot. That's one of those things that are keeping us up at night. The good news is there's been a lot of research into what builds resilience to help you combat burnout overall. And I'm sure today, even though I wasn't here, you heard a little bit about burnout in different spaces. You heard about resilience in different spaces. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to do this earlier, but let's just define this for a second. And I borrowed this brilliantly from some other researchers who were really smart as well. I go to my best practices. When you think about resilience, that feeds engagement, because resilience is how you build a shield to defend yourself against burnout. So how do you build resilience? Well, you look to the left. There's two elements of it. There's activation, there's decompression. Activation is how engaged is your workforce? How motivated are by their work? Do they feel like it's meaningful? I mentioned earlier about impact and connected to purpose. That really activates people. How, does your cup feel full at the end of the day? Do you feel inspired by what you do? Is this what got you into the role that you're in? That really supports that. The balancing measure to that is decompression. So you have to do a lot. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort to stay lifted on activation. Do you have a chance to decompress? So when you go home at night, are you able to sort of shut your mind off? Do you worry about this at night? Is this keeping you up at night, right? Can you withdraw, recharge, enjoy your life outside of work? Are you able to decompress? Because if not, you're always at this heightened state. It's tough to not burn out quickly, even if you are highly motivated. So it's a delicate balance that helps build that shield of resilience. So as you think about this and you think about what we can do to help support the workforce, it has to bring both. And you'll notice some of those elements we talked about already aren't traditional approaches. But thinking creative, a really healthy work environment that gives people what they need, but allows them to decompress in a way that supports them, is going to be the balance they're looking for. So one more report I found. I know this is a little heavy in research this year, but I just get excited about it because it's not just me. It's all of these best practice organizations really pointing out the work that's being done and the support that's out there. There was a report that came out in October, just of last year, so this was in 2024, and this came from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. They recognized that workforce in healthcare is at a critical point, that there are key issues, challenges, and they're really driving us in a path moving forward. It's a recognition that the healthcare workforce is vital. So back to my point earlier, absolutely they work hand in hand. But it goes even a step further to say that your workforce, your people, are really that human engine that are helping to drive your organizational success. You're just not going to have it without them. So how do we find ways to address that and really support them moving forward? I love this quote. "The nation's health is stronger when we have a well-trained and supported health workforce." This was actually the Secretary of Health and Human Services. So this report that came out, I think, provides a lot of great information around that. And I just wanted to provide a couple highlights to that, particularly in the path forward. So this space, They spent some time really talking about what different agencies within their organization has been focusing on. So as you can imagine, a bit of a roadmap for all of us if you think about it. First and foremost, investing in training and development. We talk about that all the time. I've had the honor of going to many of your organizations, and I'm sure you'll remember that's probably one of the first things I talked about too, because there's never enough of that, to be honest with you. And it's not just leadership, although leadership sets the tone, it helps to support, it brings the longevity, but it's each and every person there to say, how are we helping their activation? Are we helping them to grow in development? Are we helping their self-esteem? Those themes I talked about. Are we really helping to their career path, their professional development? What does that look like? Because we want to make sure that investing in them and they feel like that the organization to which they're committed is giving back to them and is an investment of resources really helps to support that overall. Next is an increased educational capacity. So recognizing we have to go down some different paths. Looking at that workforce pipeline and maybe a little bit of a different way and supporting that is important. Of course, reviewing compensation. If you were to ask somebody, when I go out, and as many of you know this, and I say if I could give you a magic wand, what's one thing you would change? Sure, a lot of people say right away, pay, right? Or compensation, being a little bit more competitive, though, with the area. And they're specific to that. It's not just an overall ask. It's saying, I want to know that we're competitive with people in our area. But it's not just that. Wages and benefits are one thing, but as we kind of go down to the bottom, it's also providing benefits that promote resilience. So remember, we talked about all of this being activation. Really, how do we help support their decompression? So do we offer childcare services so they don't have to worry about that? Do we have paid sick leave? Do we have paid time off that supports them? What what benefits are we providing that really promote that resilience from a decompression standpoint as well? So when you think about that tipping point, what do we do that moving forward? And then just sort of wrapping it up, addressing workforce culture and safety. You mentioned workforce violence was one of the things out there. That's a real thing. How do we make sure it is a safe environment that we're investing so people feel comfortable and safe coming to work every day, not only from patients, but from each other and from the environment, the community, whatever that might be. You need to have a safe space so you don't create that burnout. One of the other things this report did was provided some recommendations actually to address that burnout and burden that exists. And while I won't go through all of these necessarily, I think what you can see is really this does get to what we've identified as sources, but also lines up with the path forward moving perfectly. So addressing violence, providing mental health care access and support, those are the kind of benefits that you can provide that aren't necessarily a financial wages and benefit compensation, but are additional resources to help support that and make sure that they're as resilient as possible. Well-being metrics, et cetera, et cetera. Mental health questions from credentialing. There was some conversation around if we have that included in credentialing, are we setting ourselves up to really put forth to our providers that you won't be welcome here necessarily if you have those questions. So let's make sure we're opening up that that's okay. Supporting staffing levels and family-friendly policies, that gets back to that ensuring that it's really finding ways to promote that decompression overall. Using tools and resources to make organizational changes, and then of course training healthcare workers in team-based models. So when I say that, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second here, it's thinking through, just because we've done something in one way all this time doesn't mean we can't do something a little differently moving forward. If you don't have the resources to staff in a way that makes everyone feel safe and comfortable in providing the care you want to, then do we find a way maybe to think creatively out of the box a bit to really go in a different path? And I've heard lots of examples of that done in the organizations already. So making sure we do that moving forward. All right. So I provided a lot of information, I know, and sometimes I talk kind of fast. So I thought this would be helpful just to give a little bit of a how do we prioritize all of that into maybe 4 buckets to help think of your own path, if you will. First off, supporting and growing your staff. So investing in them. That training and professional development makes them feel invested in, supported, provided for, and are going to be more engaged in the delivery of care as a result. The second is building resilience through communication strategies and things like recognition programs, et cetera, et cetera. I've never found an organization that over-communicates. Nobody does it, right? There's always an opportunity to make sure that we are connecting back, that we're checking in, that we're supporting each other, that we're those human beings caring for each other in that way. Things like recognition too. So oftentimes when we start talking about experience of care, it's easy to look at metrics and say we're not doing. It's just as important to say we are doing. Here's a great example of something we've done well. Let's hold that up and celebrate it so we can say not only does this look great, this is what right looks like when it's good, but this is how we want to build some consistency and reliability around that. The next is organizing services to meet your community needs and reflect realities of the labor market. And I'm so sad I missed some of the conversations today because I think that you'd had these conversations in some of the other sessions. But, ensuring that your strategic plan is really aligned with what's available. And if we need to be adaptive to the last thing here and think about alternative models of care, maybe changing up of how we're going to approach that, maybe just the way we've always done it can't be the way we continue to do it moving forward, but making sure that we kind of maximize on the best that we have, leverage everything we can to meet needs, but doing it realistically and in a way that provides a very supportive environment overall. All right. So I'm actually in the wrap-up mode, believe it or not. So 3 key takeaways. And actually, if I just had one, I would say to you, number one, first and foremost, I told you your employees, your people, are that human engine that drives your success. So don't forget that. That's number one. But actually, what I kind of expanded it to say is if we were going to be more specific, patient experience, employee experience, they are absolutely fused. They are connected. They can't be apart. There is a direct correlation on your outcomes. I mentioned last year a lot about quality and safety. Think of this as the next step, hand in hand. Number 2, workforce challenges are multifaceted. They require more of a comprehensive strategy. It's one thing to approach maybe some opportunities in other areas and a little bit more of a, this is wrong, we can fix it approach. These are a little bit more soft, right? These are a little bit more of a strategy that requires a comprehensive approach. And that path forward we talked about is a nice plan that gives you a different look. That's not just a single view, but kind of a multifaceted view. And then prioritizing improvement efforts that address both patient experience and employee experience are really going to help you to be more efficient and more effective in achieving your overall outcomes. So my 3 key takeaways, and I'm going to give you one little bonus thing just to wrap the day before I go to questions. If you've been thinking about patient experience, if you've been thinking about employee experience, human experience, whatever that might be, back to my friends at the Barrel Institute, they actually sponsor every year a patient experience week. It happens to be coming up from April 28th to May 2nd. This might be a good time for you. Think about how do we recognize, how do we celebrate, how do we show executive or leadership visibility around the importance of this by celebrating this? And how do we set plan and strategy moving forward that includes this to say we're going to commit to this for the next year, whatever the case might be. I love this where it says the future of human experience in healthcare is in our hands. It truly is. Because if we're going to be human beings, caring for human beings, we need to all do it together. I can't thank you enough for being so engaged. Thank you, thank you. Have a great rest of your conference. Yeah.